Hi, you're watching Meet the Authors, a part of Alliouagana Festival of the Word 2023. I'm your host, Sharlene Lindsay, and I'm talking with Miss Marie Dewar. Hi, Marie, how are you?
Hello, Charlene. I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. Marie, you've had a busy year. 2 books in 1 year. It seems like you're following in the footsteps of Sir Howard.
Well, he's a fantastic mentor, honestly, and an extremely good role model. But yes, it has been a busy year. It's been a very exciting year as well.
I can imagine. Let's talk a bit about your latest project first. God's plans were better. Do you consider this book your memoir?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it was written coming out of a particular experience. And
Mhm.
that experience led me to think about other similar experiences that I've had in my life. And I realized that God has had a plan for me all of these years. And I've walked along, I've accomplished things, I've done things without really thinking about this. But now that I am a little older and I can look back over the years, I'm just seeing so many ways in which God's hands had to be at work. I've seen things that I wanted to do just totally pushed out of the way, and something else opened up which proved to be much better. And I've seen things like this. I've been I have to say delivered out of really, really difficult situations. Um, and so it just occurred to me that in writing these stories, I was actually putting a bit of myself out there. So yes, it is, I would consider it memoir.
What triggered the need? You speak about personal experiences, things that happened, but what triggered the need to actually write a book about these experiences?
Well, last year, at the end of March 2022, I became ill suddenly, absolutely no, there was nothing leading up to it. And I suddenly became ill, sitting down, reading one morning, and all of a sudden my nose, one nostril, my right nostril just started dripping. And I paid it no mind, but I didn't have a cold or anything. And it seemed a bit strange, but then it wouldn't stop, just like a dripping tap. And so I got up and went to check this out. And to cut a long story short, it transpired that the fluid in my brain, which we call cerebrospinal fluid, and it's that fluid which surrounds the brain and supports it and feeds it and so on. That fluid, which is supposed to be inside your skull, was actually leaking
Dripping
out
out
through
of your
one of
nose?
my nostrils.
What?
And it was leaking every 4 or 5 seconds, it was dripping out. So, I contacted my doctor. Now, this was clearly a neurological thing needing neurosurgery. The problem is that in Montserrat, we have no neurosurgeons, and in
Hey.
Antigua doesn't have any neurosurgeons either. So here am I in a real dilemma. To cut a long story short, I was admitted to the hospital, and the doctor on the ward came on his rounds the next morning. This was the Wednesday morning, and told me, we have a team of neurosurgeons visiting from the US on the weekend. And so, literally, about 3 days after I was admitted to hospital,
Wow.
a team of neurosurgeons manifested out of nowhere,
A
seemingly.
team, a whole team.
I mean, and this was a team from Harvard Medical School, Massachusetts General Hospital. And they were coming to look at what was needed in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Apparently, the main doctor who had set up a foundation called the Caribbean Neurosurgery Foundation, he had an aunt who had died. He was originally from the Bahamas.
Mhm.
And he had an aunt who died in one of the small islands there because she didn't have neurosurgical treatment. And he determined that when he became a neurosurgeon, that he was going to try and do what he could in the Caribbean to stop that happening again. And so he reached out to a CARICOM heads of government meeting. I think that was the meeting. And Montserrat was one of those countries that said, we're interested. And so he and his team were coming sort of on a fact-finding visit to Montserrat. They didn't expect to see me here, you know what I mean? And they came, and the very next morning they came to see me. And, you know, so a lot of tests were scheduled and so on. And in the end, they got me over to Antigua and did surgery on me in Antigua. And that even involved them bringing a neurosurgeon up from Trinidad who was licensed in Antigua. And also, Antigua didn't have the tools, the endoscope that they needed to carry out the surgery. And so this doctor, Dr. Knight, brought it up. And so the next morning, the next day after I arrived in Antigua, they took me into surgery and did a very successful operation. And it so happened, Sharlene, that the day on which they did the surgery and saved my life was my 70th birthday.
Wow.
So,
goosebumps.
you know,
Goosebumps.
it was quite, I know, it was quite a while before I could come back to Montserrat. I spent some days in hospital, and then I had to be in Antigua where they could watch me, observe me. Mm. When I came back to Montserrat, the first Sunday I was able to go out to church, I spoke about this. You know, I gave a testimony because this clearly was the hand of God. You can never persuade me otherwise. And I gave a testimony at church about the goodness of God towards me and his providence right in that hour. And at the end of the service, I sat in my seat for a little while. And as the people were filing out of church, Dr. Fergus came up to me, Sir Howard, and he tapped me on my shoulder and he said, "You must write your story."
Wow.
Very quietly, very quietly, he just bent towards me and he said, "You must write your story." And I thought about it. I thought about it. And so I wrote that as a small little article. Mm-hmm. But then as I wrote it, I started thinking about, well, so many other episodes had occurred in my life of almost the same kind of thing. It wasn't like, in these cases, it wasn't necessarily life-changing or life-saving, mm-hmm. but they were impactful nevertheless, and some of them changed the direction of my life. So I started to jot down, you know, some of these things. And I realized I had a book. It really didn't start out as a book. Yeah. But as I started to write, I realized that these were episodes. So the main thing I wanted to do in this book was to inspire people, hopefully with God's grace and help, to inspire people that even when things look bleak, even when hopes are dashed, even when your dreams somehow get derailed, you know, even when you're facing huge disappointments in life, you might even be dealing with the death of loved ones. Your career dreams are scattered in the clouds. You know, or even when miraculous things happen, that you just don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. God already knows about it. And he will come to pass, but according to his will. And that is the difficult thing sometimes, because we want our will to be done. Our will. Yes. But sometimes God's will is better. And hence the title of the book, God's plans were better. I had so many plans for my life, but God's plans were better. Wow. It took a long time for me to settle down and realize this. It took a long time, Sharlene. It took struggles. It took tears. It took grief. It took asking why before it all suddenly locked into place. And that episode in Antigua on my 70th birthday was what locked it all into place for me. So hence the book.
God's plans were better.
God's plans were better. It's not a book for people, only for people who are religious.
Yeah.
It's a book for everybody because we all face difficult circumstances in life, you know, and the aim of the book is not to be preaching. The aim of the book is just to share my experiences in the hope that others who are going through difficult times would be able to draw hope and, you know, draw some meaning out of maybe what they're going through as well. And their experiences might also help other people.
Right. Yeah. And in the book, you actually go from present to past and then back to present. Just a minute ago, you spoke about these different experiences that you jotted down. How did you choose which parts of your life better suited the theme of God's plans were better?
That took a little bit of thinking about, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't stray from the main theme. You know, we all have so many experiences, and especially when you've reached 70 years old, you have quite a few. So I really needed to choose the ones which best exemplified what the theme of the book was about. Now, the thing is that I approach it from different angles. So some may say, one of my friends who read the manuscript for me said, I didn't realize that you were going to say so much, you know, delve so deeply inside of yourself. And yes, there are some things in the book where I am very vulnerable. I put it out there.
Okay.
You know, I put it out there. I tell the story, and there are a few people who I had to contact and say, look, here is what I'm writing. Are you okay? You know, are you okay with this? And so on. And funny enough, nobody has said no. In fact, everybody has said, I wouldn't change a thing.
Oh, wow.
So in the book, I start out with this experience last year. I start out with that. That's where the revelation all started for me. You know, this is where I came to an understanding of what was happening. And then I go right to my beginning, because I look at, I learned about the history of my father's side of the family very strongly from his relatives. And I did not know my father as well as I would have loved to have known him. So I speak a little bit about that, and it takes me to the slave plantations of Jamaica. Because my father was from Jamaica. But my family has had a tradition of oral history, or an oral tradition, which has survived to the present day. And I sat with one of my aunts and took a tape recorder and got her to recount the story right from the days right just after emancipation. Wow. And got her to recount the stories. And another aunt, you see, had spoken to me about it before. This is another aunt, the one who spoke to me on the tape. It was her sister who I had heard talking about it before. So I knew it was something in the family. And so she spoke to me and told me, you know, so many details. So from that, I was able to recount a bit of the past, and looking at how God had just brought me into this absolutely amazing family, caused me to be raised in a particular way, and then how he brought me to Montserrat. And I came to Montserrat actually from the time I was about, 7 years old, but I only really moved to go to school here when I was 12. And it took me through all of that period and through the difficulties I had as a child not with family, but within my own self. You know, I was a very unconfident,
Okay.
unsure, um, insecure child growing up. And basically how I dealt with all of that and what moving to Montserrat to live with my mother did. Oh, those were glorious years. I had a wonderful childhood. And then moving on to look at my career, I didn't choose teaching at all. Teaching, you know. So looking at how I actually landed up in that career, which proved to be the correct career for me,
For you.
you know, the right one for me. And so, and I moved on then into the present, you know, so that's where the book started. And that's how it went ahead. So I was able to recount lots of episodes. It's got 13 chapters, and I think every one of them readers will be able to draw some hope from.
From it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is God's plans were better.
God's plans were better.
You also had earlier up in the year What Marme Say.
Yes.
Which
Yes,
is
what Marme say.
a collection of poems. You just spoke about coming from a family of what do you call it? Oralists? That's a correct word?
Yes, oral tradition.
Right. Did you always know that you were a storyteller?
No, I didn't. I didn't. But you know, as a child, my mother placed books constantly in front of us, and my grandmother as well. We just grew up around books. Where other children got pocket money to bring to school and do different things with, we weren't given any pocket money. We had zero pocket money. About once or twice a year, my grandmother would take us into a bookstore, and we would be able to choose an approved book and buy it. And so that was where the love of reading came. And I mean, I have accumulated so many books over the years, but I think I always knew that I would love to tell a story when I read books. And it was like, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could tell a story like this. You know, as a young child, Enid Blyton was one of my favorites, you know.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it went on to other people afterwards. But no, it wasn't something I always had in me. But I started writing poetry, but always in the Montserrat language.
I was just about to ask why you chose to write these poems in Montserrat language.
Well, I was never brought up speaking in the local language. I was always brought up speaking the Queen's English.
Standard English, yes.
And standard English. And when we came to Montserrat to live, and I went to the Montserrat Secondary School, I heard the Montserrat language. Plus, my mother was a very sociable person, and people would drop in and people would come to the house to, you know, sell things or see her or whatever. And so I heard the Montserrat language around me all the time. And then I got exposed to Louise Bennett, the famous Jamaican local language poet.
Okay.
And also to people like Samuel Selvon, who is a Trinidadian local language writer. And the beauty of their expressions and so on just got to me. And I read and read and read and read. And so I just started writing poems about things that were happening in the language I heard around me all the time. And that was how it started. I would read the poems to Mommy, and Mommy would laugh her head off. You know, not in mockery. She would laugh, encouraging me, you know. And that's how it started. So and that actually, I had poems I started writing probably about 52, 53 years ago.
Wow.
You know, But I started writing more seriously, like over the past maybe 45 years. And I just had all the poems, there. I went to Writers Maroon, which was held at the University Center, Dr. Fergus again. And so he liked some of my poems and submitted them to various publications.
Okay.
So I had a poem published in a New Zealand publication. I had another one done in a Barbados publication, and a few other publications. A very prominent one on cricket. I had written one on Jim Allen by that time, and so that one was submitted. And Sir Howard just submitted my poems, because he had my permission to do it, obviously, but he was just so instrumental in getting my work out there. And so I thought, well, one day. And then, probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Sir Howard sent me an email. It had no salutation, no dear Anne-Marie, no dear Miss Dewar, nothing like that.
Yes.
The email just simply said, surely by now you can publish a book of your poems. That was the content of the email.
And you read the email,
I regarded it.
You can hear his voice, right?
Yeah. And I just regarded it as a kick up the backside. Get doing what you're doing, lady, publish. And so I started putting them together. Chad Cumberbatch was tremendously helpful. And I sent the poems to Sir Howard, the ones I was thinking of including, and he wrote a foreword for me. Okay. So that he has his stamp clearly on that book as well. But it was his encouragement and push.
Okay, Ms. Dewar, this is a question that I have here that was sent in, and I'm just going to read it for you. In his book, Talking Strachan, Mike Jarvis calls what is happening now, where people are using what is authentically ours in the work, a Strachan renaissance. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For years, we have all been told that when we speak Strachan, according to his expression, that we're talking bad.
Talk properly.
Talk properly. Speak properly. That's not the way nice girls speak. You're talking bad. And our children have grown up with this. And funny enough, teachers have been very prominent in doing this. So what is happening now is that we have probably a new vision of the way that our local language actually helps to carve out our identity. It's part of who we are. Do we love who we are? Do we accept, do we embrace who we are? Or do we allow other people to define for us what should make us proud? What are the acceptable elements of our culture? Because your culture is your way of life. So your culture is all around you. Do we allow other people to dictate that for you? Or do we choose that our language is a special language? And the thing is, that our language is not just a broken English or anything like that. We have our own grammatical rules. Right. We have our own structures. And so if we for example, we do not, in our language, we do not use the verb to be. I am, you are, he, she, or it is. In English, we would say she is pretty. In Montserrat, we say I pretty.
I pretty, yes, yes.
In English, we will say, oh, she is very sick. In Montserrat, we will say, is sick bad.
Bad.
Yeah. You follow?
Yes.
So so we have our own structures, we have our own vocabulary, and we don't necessarily use words with the same. Some of the words we use don't necessarily have the same meaning as they
Yeah,
have in the English language. You
like
see,
disgusting. When you
that
say
is
a
the
child
very
is
word that comes to
disgusting.
me. Disgusting. Disgusting is a horrible thing
Ah,
in the English language.
yeah.
But in our Montserratian context, disgusting just simply means that he's out of order. He's giving trouble.
Bothersome.
He's
Bothersome. Yeah.
bothersome.
I think
Exactly.
in Trinidad we would say miserable. So it
Yeah.
means the same thing. So yes.
You know, so yes, it is a renaissance because little by little, people are becoming aware of the fact that we have a local identity, we have a national identity, we are Montserratians, and our language is a part of this. It's a part of what makes us who we are. And so we can be proud of it and we don't have to hide it. What we need to do is to be bilingual so that we
Right.
learn to speak standard English
Mm-hmm.
very well. And we're also proud of our local Montserratian language. And we understand when they are appropriate to be used. For
Right.
example, if we go into a crowd of people who only speak English, they don't come from Montserrat, they don't even come from the Caribbean, then for us to go in and start speaking in our local language isn't going to help them unless we're giving them a demonstration of our local language. You
Yeah.
know, so it's useful to have two, three, four, as many languages as we need to have. In our schools, we teach French and Spanish,
Right.
as well
Mhm.
as English language, because our Montserratian language has completely different rules. So we need to learn the rules of standard English. I agree with Mike Jarvis totally.
I'm guilty. I am guilty. I am one of those mothers who talk properly. Why are you talking like that? You know? Meanwhile, I'm using my dialect to tell to tell him to speak properly. And
But
one
what
day
we can
my
do,
son looked at me and he said, Mommy, what's wrong? It's just dialect. And you
yeah,
know, so
what we can do though is to ask our children to say that for me in English, just to make sure that they're
that
able
they
to
know.
speak it in English. You
Mhm.
know, so sometimes I would hear children at school speaking in our local language. I would say that for me in English.
Mhm.
And we'd go through what it means in English, etc. Because I want them to be bilingual. I want them to be able to what we call code switch.
Yes, yeah.
Language is a code,
Mhm.
and I want them to be able to switch the codes very easily.
It makes sense. It definitely makes sense. I so fascinated when I hear you speak Montserrat language, you know. I don't know why. Maybe it's our thinking as Caribbean people that when you're light skinned and you're an educator and you know, so I expect you to be very speaky spokey and then you
Speaky spokey,
you know
right?
you come out and you speak dialect and it doesn't sound brash, it doesn't sound vulgar, it doesn't, it just
Mm.
it's beautiful. And I think by you bringing this whole collection of poetry, not just it being how should I say, for the Montserratians who know Marie Dewar, it coming from Marie Dewar makes a difference. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes,
It makes a difference.
I understand. I understand.
What other areas do you think that we should be incorporating our language and our stories?
I think we should be incorporating them all the time. And this is one of the things. There are a lot of Montserratians who have stories inside of us. There are parents who make up stories to tell their children. If only they would write these stories down, write them down, or speak them into a phone or something and have somebody write them down. Because the more we create stories around our culture, the way we create stories around our day-to-day lives, and even incorporating our local language, the more it gets used, spread, embraced, etc. So I can't stress that enough. There are so many people that I know that have stories inside of them. And I would love to encourage folk to write. You know, if you find writing tedious, then speak your stories,
Right.
or speak what you have to say into a recorder. We have all these digital means now.
Yes.
Speak it into a story and have somebody transcribe it for you. Somebody will always edit it somewhere along the line, you know. But if only people would get out of the fear of writing, and especially writing about our local situations, stories that we tell our children, stories we've heard growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And we, you know, we think that they would be interesting, especially for children. You know, that I would love to encourage.
I would like to encourage you to read one of your poems for us from what Marme say.
Oh, okay. Well, there's one poem that I wrote years and years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based in Reiner's Village, which is an area just on the outskirts of Plymouth. Okay. You from Plymouth, from the town, you go up George Street, and right at the top of George Street, you have a little turnoff there, and that whole area inside is well, on the street going up and inside there is an entire village, Reiner's Village. And we lived on the hospital compound, because my mother was a nurse living at the hospital compound. And we would hear, you know, we would hear lots of things, lots of noises, lots of sounds and so on outside in the evening. So this poem is entitled In the Evening. And it's Reiner's Village, Montserrat, before the advent of television sets. You remember the old time sunset, when sweet evening breeze a blow? Though you weary from your labor, yet your spirit high for so. In the evening, when the work time done, and the moon take over from the blazing sun. Children playing till the sunset, sweetheart gone on moonlight walk. You ease down and nene backyard, just for sit down and old talk about work and politics and village chat about he and she, about this and that. In the evening, when the work time done and the moon take over from the blazing sun. Children gather in the backyard, not sleep. Them wide awake. Nenen tell Nancy story, Jumbie tale. The poor children frightened. Some are shake. Them now walk a dark. But go home now. They see Jumbie na every goat and cow in the evening, when the work time done and the moon take over from the blazing sun. The young boy them out the street, a roll with noisy cat na the evening time, racing the iron wheel and them with a stick hold form for keep them lying. Till one by one they hear the call, "Oh John, James boy, oh Sammy, come!" In the evening, when the work time done and the moon take over from the blazing sun.
I have a special request. I don't know if you're going to oblige. There's a poem in that book with the Rasta man, where his mom says, "Me give you one nice name and you want me to call you." You know what I'm talking about.
It's called Rasta, my son.
Yes, please. Yes, please, please.
And this was written when the Rastafarian movement came to Montserrat.
Okay.
There may have been a few before, I don't know, but it came to Montserrat big time.
Okay.
And of course, there was a lot of bewilderment in the community, especially mothers who were fearful that their children were going to follow. So you turn Rasta now, my son, and you expect that after 18 years of calling you Emmanuel, I must now forget the pride that it feel when your great grandpa put his hand on your head and give you his great grandpa name. Now you say your name Ras Aikido. Jesus Christ, the name Emmanuel. It have any God name Aikido. And when I beg you for comb your hair and go look for work, you call your mother daughter and tell me for scant. So you locks up your head, my son, and you call in Pan Selassie and Panja, who give you more overstanding than the rest of we. You a dream about Ethiopia. While you a dream, my son, who a go look for you youth them? Me no mother milk a ital food, and you go locks up them head. School children wicked, you know. Oh, you go educate them yourself and give them some the overstanding where Jah give you. You say Jah leading you to the hills to meditate upon the holy word with the holy weed. When Jah call you, my son, me go turn up somewhere where you can't see me. And me go say, son, try that with love. And then me go ball.
Oh, good job, Miss Dewar. Absolutely love it. I mean, I have my copy. I was privy to that specific poem before the book was even released. So I don't know. I think it just, it holds a special place in my heart. But
thank you.
big congratulations on what Marme say, and God's plans were better. How can we get our hands on your books?
Well, both of them. Well, what Marme say is available on Amazon. There are a few copies on island. Montserrat National Trust has copies, and I always try to keep some copies, but they are available on Amazon for people who are overseas. Wherever you are overseas, you can get a copy on Amazon. And that's out in paperback. The God's Plans Were Better will be released soon, within a few weeks, and that will also be available on Amazon.
Okay. So you heard it. You can have books on Amazon. That is Wa Marme say, not what. Remember, we speak in Montserrat language here, not standard English. So it's Wa Marme say, and God's Plans Were Better.
That one is coming soon.
Thank you so much for joining me on Meet the Authors. I hope that these two are just the beginning, because I'm looking out for more books from you. Thanks for being a part of Alliouagana Festival of the Word 2023. As for our AFW viewers, stick with us. We'll be back with more.